I started playing this new alien abduction game, and somewhere between the empty farmhouse and the lights in the sky, I realized something. Aliens used to scare the absolute shit out of me. And you know what? They still do. Honestly though, the fear used to feel different. It would follow me for weeks after the television was turned off. It waited outside my bedroom window. I used to look constantly, and if any unexplained light in the sky, I would see it and it would stay in my head for absolute weeks because there wasn't an internet full of people waiting to explain why or to turn it into a meme. I never really show this often. Some people have seen it, but later tonight, I'm gonna show you a photograph I took myself. And when I took it, there was nothing in the picture, no photo of a person, no entity, no ghost, nothing. But in the camera, when you look at it closely, you notice something, and I still can't explain it. I'm gonna show you it at the end. Let's stop for a moment. I wanna fast travel back to the early 1990s, where all of this started. There was no social media, no cell phones. They weren't sitting in everybody's pocket or on your desk. Everything seemed to move a little bit slower. Now, I'm not going to pretend that every part of the 90s was better. You know, there was some bad stuff. There was some trauma. Some of that peace was probably just the fact that I was a kid and I wasn't worried about bills, work emails, or replying to texts, just like we've talked about before in the past. But you got to agree, the world did feel a bit quieter. As you probably guessed, one of my biggest hobbies after school was gaming. And you know what? Of course, I played outside with my friends until the street lights came on. We played street hockey and football, but those hours in between were mostly me, a video game, and just my pure imagination. Games didn't end when I switched off the console or my parents yelled at me to go to bed. I carried them around in my head. You know, a spooky game or a dark hallway in a game like Resident Evil would make the real hallway outside my bedroom feel just different for the rest of the night. Absolutely terrifying. And you know what? There was another side to having that much little distractions and that much imagination. You know what it was? You had time to notice things. There seemed to be room for the unknown. You noticed the sound in the backyard that didn't belong there. You noticed the creaking on the floors that you thought were your parents, but it wasn't. You noticed the light moving behind trees through your window. You noticed when the neighborhood suddenly became completely silent. Today, if something strange happens, most of us barely even look up because we're dive deep into our phones on TikTok, social media, looking at ridiculous videos. We're tired, we're distracted from work, and we're just thinking about how can we survive tomorrow. But back then, it was just a different time. It was an empty time. And those empty time moments gave the unknown somewhere to live. Now, I'm not saying there was more ghost, monster, or alien activities in the 1990s. I'm saying we had more time to sit with the possibility. We had more time to notice the unknown. We had worse footage, we had fewer answers, less photos and videos, but somehow all that made everything feel more real than it does now. I feel like if you're watching a camcorder video and you saw one fuzzy light in the sky, it would just haunt you for years. And it really did for me. There was no reverse image search, no comment section identifying, or everyone being saying there was fishing line used. Everyone's a professional now, right? There was no AI or Photoshop back then. Sometimes there was only the footage and whatever your imagination did with it going forward after that. What else happened during the 90s? During the 90s, I call it the alien boom. Aliens were everywhere. They were at the height of popularity. You had the X-Files, unsolved mysteries, sightings, UFO documentaries, strange photographed, copied VHS tapes were everywhere, footage you could see on TV, the grainy footage that always looked like it was just recorded with somebody that was absolutely running for their lives. Then late at night, there were voices on the radio talking about Area 51, ghosts, missing time, cattle mutilations, lights over small towns, abductions. One of my favorite shows was Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, now featuring George Norrie. It was 800 AM radio for me where I was located in the Detroit, Michigan area. Art Bell can make one caller describing a light over the desert feel scarier than an entire horror movie. And me being like 10 years old listening to that, it stuck with me for life. I would go online on my computer and go to their website, and those programs, they would show a gray alien face at 10:30 at night or 12 at night, and I would be absolutely terrified to go to bed. I would never want to go to bed. And the classic gray alien was the worst one. It had the oversized head, the tiny mouth, the pale body, the enormous black eyes. It didn't have fangs or anything crazy, no claws. It wasn't screaming, it was calm. And I feel like it's the calm before the storm that you have to worry about. And that's what made it frightening. It looked at us in a way that we might look at an insect in a jar. It was curious, it was intelligent, and completely in control of the situation. I want to talk about a childhood experience I had. My childhood bedroom was a little bit unusual for the rest of the house in the neighborhood. And the fact is, it had a back door in my bedroom that opened up directly into the backyard. At night, that meant there was only one locked door, and I had a small window between my bed and whatever might be standing outside staring at me in there. Here's a memory I had. I was around 5 or 6 years old. I woke up one night to a very bright, flickering light that was coming through my back door into the backyard window. Now, we had a privacy fence, so there wasn't cars driving by. It seemed like it was going through the trees. This wasn't a soft glow of a porch light. In my memory, it was bright enough to change my entire room. The light, it kind of would pulse and flicker, then it would disappear, and then it would return. It was a little bit of a cooler light, almost like a bluish teal. One thing that I did know is I was absolutely terrified. And no, I didn't get out of bed to go investigate it. I was 5 years old. I did the only reasonable thing that was available to me at that time, and anybody would do. I pulled the blankets over my head. I squeezed my eyes so tightly shut, and I just tried to disappear. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I remember is slowly waking up again. You know when you wake up and you feel groggy and a little bit heavy, like someone called your name? And I was waking up like that, like I was coming through deep layers of sleep. I slowly opened my eyes, and what I saw, standing over me, over my bed, was a large head. It was a gray head. It had two enormous eyes looking directly at me. These eyes were a little bit different than the lore. These were not blacked out eyes. These eyes had large pupils. As I gazed into these giant eyes and it peered back at me, it just blinked. And then the next thing that I know, I woke up again in the morning. That's one of the key details that stayed with me over all these years. It wasn't a monster jumping. It wasn't screaming. It didn't have large black eyes, just those normal giant pupils that was watching me sleep, almost like it was keeping me asleep and I wasn't supposed to wake up and see it. The next morning, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have much memory of it at first, but then I did remember it and I was like, wow, that's kind of weird. Did that happen? I think yes, it did. I didn't tell anybody. I don't know if it was a nightmare, a waking dream, was it sleep paralysis, something my half-awake brain built from some alien movie or maybe the show I was listening to that night. But at that time, I wasn't listening to shows because I was younger. I didn't start listening to Coast to Coast till I was probably 10, 11, or 12, all through high school for the rest of my life. The key question I have is, was this extraterrestrial? Was this an alien? I can't prove that it was, but I can't prove that it wasn't. But knowing the possible explanations doesn't erase the way I felt or how I still remember that face and that blink. For years, it remained one of those childhood memories you keep locked in the back of your mind. You don't think of it too often, maybe if someone talks about aliens, but then when I was 19, it happened again. It was almost the exact same sequence. Waking up in a very unnatural, heavy state, sensing something close to me, seeing the large gray-shaped head with those giant impossible eyes, looked at it, it looked at me and blinked, and then I suddenly fell back asleep again. Now here is a key point to this one. I personally close all my closets at night. I always believed closets were a portal, so I close them every night. When I woke up this morning, my closet was open. Yes, that might not be a big deal, but to me it is, because I never go to sleep with my closets open. Now, I still can't tell you with certainty what happened to me. Maybe the mind can repeat old fears so convincingly that it feels physical. No, I wasn't drinking. Maybe sleep is far stranger than we understand. Maybe sleep opens up another dimension, a portal, if you will. But that uncertainty is part of what never completely leaves you. I'm gonna make a statement, and that is, I believe aliens are real. I just think the universe is too enormous to just think that Earth produced the only intelligent life that ever existed. I think this is a common belief for most people. That doesn't mean my memories prove that I was visited. Those are two separate claims completely. But the possibility of a real intelligent being is exactly why aliens frighten me more than ghosts or demons do. You know, ghost stories usually come with rules. A spirit belongs to a house, an attached object. Demons can be invited in, blah, 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 all this stuff. And I do believe in those as well. But there are boundaries, you know, even if they're only part of stories. But here's the difference. An alien would be alive. He's physical. He's intelligent. They could have technologies far beyond ours, especially to get in a locked door or a wall or an alarm system. It means nothing to them. It could arrive when it wants, interrupts our sleep, communicates without speaking, changes what we remember about them, then leave without explaining any of it or why it was there. The scariest possibility isn't that it hates us. It's that it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to explain anything that it does. We cannot control them. We simply just become something that it studies. And that is the most terrifying part to me personally. Whether they are pleasant or whether they are hostile, the fact that we can't control them and we are always vulnerable will be something that frightens me forever. You know what eventually changed everything is the internet and social media. Today, there are more cameras pointed at the world than ever before, more satellites, flock cameras, you name it. It's all over. Everybody has a cell phone and a camera and a video recorder in their pocket. Yet every new image that we see feels less and less convincing than it did in the 90s. Everyone has an explanation. A light is probably a drone. It's a satellite. It's an airplane. The photograph was edited. It could be CGI. It could be Photoshop. It could be AI. Before you decide how it makes you feel, somebody already explained it. They mocked it. Even if it was real, you already got made fun of and it scrolled away. We could see real photos in front of us and no one will believe. The internet didn't make alien life less possible. It made the mystery just harder to hold on to. The unknown used to meet us alone in a quiet bedroom through television static. Now it appears between an advertisement, an ad, videos, somebody falling off a roof, sport teams. It's absolutely ridiculous. Fear needs silence. It needs time to breathe. That is what this alien abduction game gave back to me. An empty farmhouse, a dark sky, a light outside the window, and nothing to do except walk towards it. For a moment, I wasn't an adult anymore. I wasn't thinking about work, bills, notifications. I was a kid again, staring back at the door, wondering what was on the other side. Before we leave tonight, I want to show you a photograph. This is the original image when I took it. I did not see a person in this image when I took this photograph, or any kind of figure for that matter, standing where this figure is standing. Now here is the adjusted version that I did put on Photoshop. I tried to make it a little more legible and clear. I adjusted mainly the contrast. I increased the visibility just so you can see the shape a little bit better. That caught my attention. Now I'm not presenting this as proof of anything, but I know what it looks like to me, and I know that this is not a faked image. Just look at this before you read anyone else's opinion and tell me what you see in the comments, truly. This is not fake, this is not AI. There's definitely more to this story than this photograph shows. There's a little bit more context to it, where I was, why I took it, and what happened around it. But that deserves its own night. If you want to hear that, maybe I'll tell it in the comments below. Thank you for joining me tonight for the After Hours. Make sure to lock your doors, close your blinds, and every once in a while, put down your phone and pay attention to the silence. Because the silence is never as empty as it sounds. This is FrameBreaker. Have a good night.